Okay, so endocrine system is the system of glands which have no ducts and which are covered by large, deep mass of capillaries. Okay, so endocrine glands are the glands which has no ducts and covered by blood capillaries. They produce the chemical messenger called hormone. Endocrine system is one of the major component of player of maintenance of homeostasis in our body. Endocrine system are scattered all over our body. They are in the form of an organ, or they are scattered as group of cells in the organs. So that is the endocrine system. Okay, so what exactly endocrine system do? Endocrine system, endocrine glands produce hormones, and that hormone then drain into, delivered into the bloodstream. If, as you see this uh, diagram here, so glandular cells, which is endocrine glands, secrete hormone into bloodstream, and then bloodstream carry from that particular endocrine glands to the cells which are the way away from that endocrine gland. And if you see here, the hormones which are dot here, they can act only on the target cells. Target cells means the cells which have receptors for that particular hormone. Okay, so this is cells with hormone receptor respond to the hormone. But like white cells here, they don't have receptors. In that case, the dotted hormones will not affect these cells because there are no receptors. Okay, so again, endocrine glands are ductless glands. You see there is no ducts. They just release this hormone, small dots, put into nearby blood capillaries, and then travel all the way where there is target cells. They bind with the target cell receptor, and then they produce their effect. And there are three major kind of effect of the hormone. That is growth, metabolism, and reproduction. Let's see one example. You have your endocrine gland, islets of Langerhans in your pancreas. What hormone that endocrine gland, like islets of Langerhans produce?
Insulin.
Insulin and glucagon. That hormone then get into, from the pancreas, go to your blood. And then you go to liver cells, skeletal muscle cells, and adipose cells. And then in the cell, what they do? Do they affect growth? No. Do they affect reproduction? No. Then what does insulin and glucagon do? They affect metabolism. Metabolism of which nutrients?
Sugar.
Sugar. So it affects the metabolism of sugar, glucose. Okay, that's how all. Similarly, your testis and ovary produce testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, and then they get into blood, and then they spread all over the body, and produce effect in different part of the reproductive organs and on the pregnancy. Oogenesis, spermatogenesis, that is reproduction. Your anterior pituitary gland produces hormone called growth hormone. That goes to your muscle cell, your bone cells, your epithelial cells, and increase the number of those cells by mitosis or the size of those cells. And that is growth. So that's how these hormones produce its effect. Okay. So endocrine glands, you see here, this is the gland here, endocrine gland. They are endocrine cells. The dots inside these cells release outside the cell in the interstitial space. And from the interstitial space, they are diffused into these capillaries and then carried into the bloodstream and then goes to the target cell, because target cells are also covered by blood capillaries. So from these blood capillaries now, the same hormone exit from the blood capillaries, comes to these target cells, binds with these target cells, and modify the function of these target cells. Let me interject two information here. So let me ask you a question. Once this hormone here, are you paying everybody attention? If you pay attention here and then you read your PowerPoint or lecture, it will be easier. So pay attention. Some of the students just open it and don't pay attention. Follow me. So when this hormone released from these capillaries, they act on the cell. What is the possible way a hormone can act? What are the possible ways? Just guess. This is the cell.
A protein
This
or
is the
like
cell.
a receptor?
This is the cell. So the hormone either can bind on the receptor on the plasma membrane of these cells, or they can get inside the cell and then bind with the receptor in the cytoplasm, or they can travel all the way to the nucleus inside the cell and bind with the DNA. So if they bind on the surface of plasma membrane, they change the metabolism inside the cell in the cytoplasm. But if they enter the cell, then they can change the genetic function, which means transcription of the gene. So hormones are two kinds. One is water soluble and another is fat soluble. Which one you think can enter the cell and which one you think can bind with the receptor on the plasma membrane?
Fat soluble can enter.
Good, very good. Fat soluble can enter the cell and water soluble can bind with a receptor on the plasma membrane. So from here, you got that the hormones binds with the receptors and receptors can be found on the plasma membrane, or receptors can be found inside the cytoplasm or inside the nucleus of our cell. Okay, that's how hormone acts. This is the basic of the hormone action. Okay. Okay. So the endocrine glands in the body. Let's start from your head region. In the head, the main endocrine gland in your brain is the hypothalamus. Here, hypothalamus basically controls all endocrine in the body. So hypothalamus will release the releasing hormone that acts on the anterior pituitary, and then anterior pituitary produce trophic hormones which release into blood, and then that acts on all other endocrine glands. This is important to understand how endocrine system works. So master gland is pituitary, but master of the master is hypothalamus. Okay? Again, hypothalamus produce releasing hormones. RELEASING, releasing hormones. Then that is spread into capillaries here, which brings the releasing hormones to the anterior pituitary gland here. Anterior pituitary gland then produce trophic hormones, TROPHIC, trophic hormone, which then goes to all other organs, endocrine glands, like thyroid gland, thymus, adrenal gland, and ovary, and other glands. Okay? And those endocrine glands then release hormones, which hormones then target the target cells. So in the head region, 3 endocrine gland: major, hypothalamus, pituitary, and in the posterior side you see here, this is pineal gland. In the neck, we have around your larynx, you have parathyroid gland. And then you come into the chest, you have thymus, which is behind the sternum. Bilateral above your kidney, attached to your kidney, there is bilateral adrenal glands. Then in the pancreas, the glands are not as organ, because pancreas is an organ, and inside the pancreas there is like a small islands like structure scattered, that is called islets of Langerhans, and those are pancreatic the endocrine tissues. Then in the male, testis is another endocrine gland, and in the female, the ovaries are the endocrine glands. So these are the group of endocrine glands in our body. Okay, so no matter which endocrine gland, they produce a chemical compound, and we call that the chemical messenger produced by endocrine gland. It's called
Hormones.
hormones. And who produces hormones, by the way? The cells in the endocrine glands, yes? So like hypothalamic neuron produce trophic hormones, pituitary gland cells produce, hypothalamic neurons produce releasing hormone, pituitary gland cells produce trophic hormones, islets of cells in pancreas produce insulin and glucagon. So the cells inside the endocrine gland produce hormones. Now let me check your understanding of the basic cytology. Do you remember you did cytology? So which organelle in the cell produce hormones. This is not a hard question.
Is it the hypothalamus?
No, question was,
Oh.
which organelles in the cell? You know the cell function? We
The
have plasma membrane.
endoplasmic reticulum.
Endoplasmic reticulum. Which one is smooth or rough?
Both.
If it is protein hormone, then yes, rough. If it is lipid, then smooth. Okay. So cells produce. Okay. Now let's see here. Classes of chemical messengers. So in our body, there are 3 classes of chemical messengers, apart from including hormones. So let's see a cell. First, let me name it. So classes of chemical messengers are autocrine, paracrine, and endocrine. Auto means self, para means around, endo means inside. Okay. So let's see here. When a cell or any gland produce a chemical compound, which is chemical messenger, and then that chemical compound change the function of the same cell, then that chemical messenger is called autocrine. Okay. So they are secreted by cells in a local area and influence the activity of same cell from which it was secreted by, for example, prostaglandin. So prostaglandin is secreted by the cells in the body and they activate the same cells. On the other hand, paracrine hormones, chemical messenger, they are secreted by a cell and they travel not far away but nearby and they affect nearby cells. You see here? So this cell is producing the chemical compound and which is acting on this smooth muscle cell. 2 examples are somatostatin, which is growth hormone, and histamine. Like in your stomach wall, ECL cell produce histamine. And that can activate the local cells, particularly parietal cells, okay? Or gastrin secreting cells. Whereas endocrine chemical messengers, which is hormone, it's secreted into the blood by specialized cells and travel some distance to target tissues, result in coordinated regulation of cell function. And we're going to talk about these a lot. So again, if a chemical messenger act on the same cells which has produced it, that is autocrine, like prostaglandin. If a chemical messenger produced by a cell act on other cells but nearby, not far away, then that is paracrine. And if a cell produce a hormone which travel all the way far away from the cell it produces and then act, then we call it endocrine. Okay. So how nervous system neurons work? Neurons release neurotransmitter. And then the neurotransmitter, as you know, binds with when a neuron releases neurotransmitter, it binds with what? Come on.
Combine with the other part of a neuron, like the dendrite.
It binds with the dendrites. But what structure in the dendrites?
Plasma membrane.
Is it the synaptic cleft?
That's what it crosses.
The receptors and the synaptic cleft.
Yeah, there are
Yes.
receptors.
Yes.
right?
So when a neuron releases a neurotransmitter, then it binds with the postsynaptic receptors, and receptors can be on postsynaptic dendrites or on the muscle cell too. Like if your motor neuron release neurotransmitter, it will bind with the receptors on the skeletal muscle plasma membrane, epithelial cell plasma membrane, or any cardiac muscle cell, any cell in the body.
Sometimes can't they also bind with like axons or somas of another neuron?
Not
Like,
axons, not axons, never with the
well,
axons.
sometimes they do. I thought rarely they do.
The receptors always binds with the soma, body, or dendrites, or the postsynaptic cells. Okay.
Okay.
So here you go. This is the neuron. It's releasing neurotransmitter, and then it's gonna bind with dendrites, receptor on the dendrites, or receptor on the cell body, or receptor on other cells. Here you see target cells. They are binding. Whereas endocrine glands produce the cells producing hormone, putting into blood, and then it is binding with the target cells. So neurotransmitter and hormone pretty much has similar action. Neurotransmitter also change the function of these cells, and these targets, the hormone also change the function of that target cells. That's why, if you remember at the beginning, the main player in the homeostasis of the body is the nervous system and the endocrine system. Okay, so now, again, endocrine glands produce hormones, and hormones are produced by either rough or smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and then modified by Golgi apparatus, and then stored as a vesicle, and then transported from that cell in the interstitial space, and then from the interstitial space it enters blood. So based on where they are produced, based on their chemical structure, hormones can be classified into steroid hormone, protein hormone, or biogenic amine hormones. Okay, so you see here steroid hormones are lipid soluble because fats are lipid. Steroid is made from your fat. So steroid hormones are lipid soluble, and they are formed from the cholesterol, and cholesterol is formed from lipid. On the other side, protein hormones are made from amino acid chains, and that's why they are water soluble. Biogenic amines are water soluble except thyroid hormone, which is also derived from the modified amino acid, and they are the water soluble. Some of the example of biogenic amines are like norepinephrine, epinephrine, thyroid hormone, nitric oxide, they all, okay? So example of the protein hormone is parathyroid hormone, and steroid hormone is cortisol. So now my question is, these two hormones, protein hormone and amine hormones, will bind with receptor on the plasma membrane of target cells, whereas steroid hormone will enter the cell into the cytoplasm and then travel all the way to the nucleus, where it binds with the DNA to change the function of genetic transcription in that particular gene. Okay. So this is showing how homeostasis is maintained by endocrine system. So let's see the homeostasis of blood sugar in our body and put into this homeostasis chain. So let's see it is like 4 a.m. in the morning and your blood sugar is reduced. Reduced blood sugar will be detected by the receptor in the hypothalamus, in the pancreas, and then sensor will go to the pancreas, which is control center, integrating center and control center both. And then pancreatic islet cells, which is the effector. If your blood sugar is low at 4 a.m., effector cells are alpha and beta cells of pancreas, islets. So what will be the response here? Your blood sugar is low. Which cell will produce the hormone?
Beta.
Okay, beta cell produce what?
Glucagon.
What glucagon does what?
Glucagon raises your blood sugar.
So beta cell produce glucagon?
Gluconeogenesis.
Beta cell produce glucagon? No, alpha cell produce glucagon. Beta cell produce insulin. Okay, so alpha cell will produce glucagon, and then glucagon will go to your liver, your muscle, break down your glycogen, put into your blood, increase your blood glucose, and then balance it through the increasing blood glucose, and you give negative feedback again, maintain normal level. So this homeostasis is maintained like your thermostat maintaining your room temperature now. Okay. So here, a role of hormones in homeostasis, we have done, like when we did homeostasis this. So you have normal range here, and normal range fluctuates. So when this is like a value, X is the value, when value go up, and when it touch the threshold, when it touch the threshold, then the hormone is released and brings it back. When it goes again down and touch the base, then hormone is released and maintained is up. And that's how our body homeostasis is maintaining all the time to the with a negative feedback mechanism. Every time there is fluctuation, hormone is released and brings it back to the normal. Okay. Let's talk about some histology of the endocrine glands. So first, histology is this is the pancreas histology. This is the pancreas histology. Whole pancreas is acinus of the pancreas. You see, pancreas is a mixed gland, you know. It has exocrine and endocrine. That means it makes enzymes and it also makes hormones. So most of the part, almost 90% of the pancreas is exocrine acidus, which makes pancreatic enzymes. Very few area here and there, which is like islands. That's why we call it islets of Langerhans. Langerhans are by the name of the individual who discovered. So Langerhans, And in the pancreatic islets, you have the endocrine cells, and they are alpha cell and beta cell. And you see areolar connective tissue is holding them. And then there is a lot of blood capillaries inside. So once they produce, they put into the blood capillaries here. So two types of secretory endocrine cells here will be alpha cell, beta cells. There is another cell which is called delta cell. So alpha cell produce glucagon, beta cell produce insulin, and delta cell produce somatostatin, which is a growth hormone, like growth like hormone. Okay. Okay. So endocrine glands versus organs. Like thyroid is an organ, and we have thyroid gland here in the neck. If you go to posterior of the thyroid gland, you have two pairs of parathyroid gland. In the brain, as I said, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal gland. Now you come in the neck, behind the sternum, in front of your ascending aorta, you have thymus gland. Then you come to your kidney. Above the kidney, you have adrenal gland. Then pancreas, testis, ovaries. These are the glands. So here, thyroid is gland, adrenal gland is gland, thyroid gland is gland and organ. Adrenal gland is a gland and organ, but if you come to pancreas, pancreas has endocrine gland, which is islets, but they are not organ. They are just group of cells. Organ is pancreas. You see? So hypothalamus is organ, thymus, heart, all here. Okay. Let's talk about the master gland in the body, which is the anterior pituitary gland. Here is the hypothalamus. And then you have the stuck, pituitary stuck here, neck, which is extending. And then this is pituitary gland. It has two lobes, the anterior lobe in your left side and posterior lobe on your right side. So as I said earlier, hypothalamus produce releasing hormones. And what are those releasing hormones? TRH. TRH is thyroid releasing hormone. Let me write down text. TRH is thyroid releasing hormone. Then there is GnRH. GnRH is gonadotropin releasing hormone. And it is CRH. It is corticotropin releasing hormone. And then you have GHRH. Oh, sorry, first CRH, corticotrophin, and GA. Growth hormone releasing hormone. Growth hormone releasing hormone. Okay, so these are the hormones synthesized from your hypothalamus and through the blood vessel, which is called portal system, the capillary here, and then blood vessel, and then again capillaries. They are drained into, through the capillaries, they come here to the anterior pituitary gland. Let's see which acts where. So TRH is acting on the by name, it must act on the thyroid gland. So you activate thyroid gland, and thyroid gland then produce thyroid hormone, which is T3 and T4. Gonadotrophin releasing hormone, by name, it comes to the, you see, to the gonads. In male, it acts on the testis. In female, it acts on the ovary. And there are two kinds of gonadotrophin hormone. One is luteinizing hormone, another is follicle stimulating hormone. CRH, corticotrophin releasing hormone. You see here, follow it. Cortex means outside. So it acts on the outer part of the adrenal gland. And then adrenal cortex produce several hormones like aldosterone, corticosterone, corticoids, those hormones. Then the last is growth hormone releasing hormone. Growth hormone, you see, acts on the liver, and then your liver produce growth factor, inhibitory growth factor, intrinsic growth factor, and that acts on the muscle cell to grow. Growth hormone directly acts on the muscle cells, bone cells, and other cells, and increase the number and size of these cells. The thyroid releasing hormone also acts on the, the anterior pituitary also produce another hormone here, directly anterior pituitary, which is called prolactin hormone under the influence of TRH, and that acts on your breast to increase the size of the breast during pregnancy to produce milk. So prolactin is the hormone which increase the size and secretion of milk. Okay. Well, they are written here. I don't know, I have to write them. Huh. Okay. So in anterior pituitary, there are two kinds of cell called acidophils, which attract to acidic strain, and basophil. And acidophils that produce somatotropin, growth hormone, and prolactin, whereas basophils that produce all other, ACTH, TSH. Okay. So these are the, let me talk about the how endocrine system is affected by our emotion and stress. So let's see if somebody is adult and reproductive life is normal, and if one goes through stress all the time, then the hippocampus, our limbic system are connected to our hypothalamus. Then hypothalamus will release a lot of reduced amount of GnRH, then GnRH will have effect on the anterior pituitary, which produce two hormone, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and their lack of these two hormone will have the reduced function of the ovary and testis. And then you have reduced amount of testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, which will reduce your libido as well as reproductive life. So that's how individuals' reproduction and sexual life is affected by the stress. Okay. And that is called hypothalamo pituitary ovarian axis. Okay. Here you go. Now the posterior pituitary gland. So now anterior pituitary gland is making these all hormones. You see PRL, TSH, LH, FSH, ACTH, growth hormone. So luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, prolactin, growth hormone. Okay. Now posterior pituitary gland do not make any hormone. The hormone are made for posterior pituitary gland, hormones are made in the hypothalamus. And then they are put into blood and then passed to the posterior pituitary, where it is released, stored, and then released when needed. Okay. So again, anterior pituitary makes its hormone, whereas posterior pituitary does not mix its hormone. It receives hormone from hypothalamus. Anterior pituitary also gets hormone from hypothalamus, but those hormones activate anterior pituitary to make anterior pituitary hormone. Okay, so let's see what are the hormones made by hypothalamus, which is stored in posterior pituitary. Here you go. By the way, anterior pituitary is also called adenohypophysis. Means they are like a gland, and posterior pituitary is called neurohypophysis because they are like nervous system, neurons. So you see here in the hypothalamus, we have two major nuclei. There are several other nuclei in the hypothalamus. These two nuclei are associated with posterior pituitary. This is called paraventricular nuclei. You know, nucleus are in the brain, group of neurons. So paraventricular neurons, nuclei here, and supraoptic, which is above the optic chiasm. That's why we call them supraoptic. Supraoptic nuclei. Paraventricular nucleus produce oxytocin, and supraoptic nuclei produce antidiuretic hormone, ADH, and they are stored into the posterior pituitary. This is called hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract because these tracts are connected between the hypophyseal hypophysis. Hypophysis is your hypothalamus area, and hypothalamus here, and pituitary gland. So hypophyseal and hypothalamo tract. These hormones are stored here. Oxytocin has two functions. One function, oxytocin contract uterus during the childbirth. It contract myoepithelial cells in the breast, which is squeeze milk during the breastfeeding. And you know the function of antidiuretic hormone. What does it do?
Prevents the production of urine.
How?
By holding on to solutes. by reabsorption.
In the collecting duct of our nephron, when nephron joins collecting duct in the kidney, this hormone acts on the collecting duct and it puts aqua channels on the collecting duct and takes water from the collecting duct into the blood capillary. So it reduces the urine and increase your blood volume. That's is the function.
The aquaporin 2 channels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oxytocin has another function. It acts in your brain in the male and female, and it makes you more kind and caring. So oxytocin hormone is also called sometimes love hormone because it makes you kind and helpful. Okay. Thyroid gland is made up of follicles, you see. And these follicular cells you see here, cuboidal cells, these cells synthesize thyroid hormone, put it into this colloid fluid inside the thyroid follicle, and then thyroid stimulating hormone from anterior pituitary acts on these cells and then release that hormone into the nearby blood capillaries you see here. Outside the thyroid follicles, there are some other cells. We call it parafollicular cells. And these parafollicular cells produce calcitonin. Calcitonin reduce your blood calcium. Okay, that is the thyroid gland. This is wrong. This is pancreatic islets. You can this is wrong way heading. This should be islets of Langerhans. Okay, this is the pancreas. Parathyroid glands are behind the thyroid gland and they produce parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone increase blood calcium by breaking down your bone and absorbing bone calcium from your GI tract and from your kidney. Okay, so this is all in our today's pre-lab session.
Professor, do you have